So I think most people could probably tell that right now I am a little bit sick, but don't worry, I can still speak. And I just want to make sure that people understood that, yeah, right now I'm a little bit sick. But enough of that. I really want to talk about the current state of affairs within the Democrat Party because I really believe a lot of people are just ignoring how bad of a state the Democrat Party really is. Now, of course, everyone's talking about the Republican Party and how much of a shit show in some areas it has become. And yes, that is true. There are a lot of divisions on the right over stuff like immigration, the war in Iran, the current state of affairs with the Trump admin. These are actual issues that do divide a lot of people on the right. But let's be honest here. The vast majority of people on the right to this day are still mostly unified. Yes, there's been some nutcases like MTG, Tucker Carlson, and a few others that have completely lost it. But let's be honest here. The vast majority of people on the right, they are still mostly unified. You cannot say the same thing about the Democrat Party. And not enough people are talking about this because most people, they just think the Republican Party is the only party having major issues. No. In fact, you can make the case that the Democrat Party is in a much more fractured state than the Republican Party is. Now, does this mean everything's perfect for the GOP? Of course not. But when you actually look at what's going on here, the Democrat Party has way more problems than Republicans do. And a good example of what's going on here is the Michigan Senate race. As a couple days ago, we had a surprisingly close primary that a lot of people just assumed that El Said was going to win by 10, 15, 25 points. And yes, he did win by a single point. This was a huge underperformance. Nobody, and I mean nobody, predicted it was going to be this close. Some people thought maybe it's within 10 points. Maybe. But as everyone knows, it was not just within 10, it was within a single point. And really, the only reason Haley Stevens did not win was because McMurrow was still on the ballot. Even though she dropped out, it was too late to get her name off the ballot completely. And she got 4% of the vote. And we all know these McMurrow voters, 90% of them would have broken for Haley Stevens, and she would have won. This primary was the worst possible scenario for Dems because not only did they pick El Said, who's a radical nutcase, who I would argue is a very weak candidate, everyone thought he was going to win by like 20 points, have a clear mandate. And yes, there would be some base problems regardless, and we'll get to that in a second. But if he won by like 25 points or whatever, if he clearly got above 50%, it's clear that the base really wanted him. Not only did he not win by 25 points, he won by a single point and didn't even crack 50%. That is not good at all. That is DEFCON 1. Everybody knows it. He underperformed big time, which is very noteworthy because you look at the current polling right now, and even though this is Michigan polling, especially in August, Mike Rogers is beating El Said. Does that mean he's for sure going to win? Of course not. But guys, at the same point back in 2024, Mike Rogers was getting killed. He was losing by like 8 points consistently. Now he's winning. I get it. You can argue name recognition. That's part of it. But guys, right now, with everything going on with the war in Iran, with it being August, usually when Democrats peak, not all the time, of course, but most of the time, this is when Democrats peak in the polling. They're down already. And El Said is a giant underperformer. We just saw it. I know it's a primary poll. I get that. We're talking about a different set of circumstances. But guys, He underperformed significantly by 9 points. Some polls had him winning by 16, 10, 13, 15, and he won by a single point. That is the issue here. You have an underperformer who even a lot of Democrats would admit is quite radical, has a lot of skeletons in the closet, and he just barely won, despite everyone expecting him to win by a landslide. That is not good. We are, what, 3 months away from Election Day? I just don't think there is really enough time for him to recover from this. Is it possible? Yes, I get it. 3 months, it is a lifetime in politics. But man, just at a surface level, this looks extremely difficult for him to recover from. But here's the issue for El Said. You think that's bad enough that, yeah, he barely won, did not get a mandate that he expected to get, had a very brutal primary. That's not all. Already, we now have reports that a bunch of Jewish Democrats in the state of Michigan are crossing party lines. They're saying, we cannot vote for El Said. We are voting for Mike Rogers. In fact, there was a separate report where it's not just a couple random voters saying they're going to vote for Mike Rogers. No, apparently, some of the biggest donors in the state of Michigan for Democrats will be backing Mike Rogers and holding fundraisers for him. That is very noteworthy. And I know these voters alone would not be the only reason Mike Rogers wins. Like, yeah, no shit. But this is a big deal because for years now, the Democrat Party has always been vote blue no matter who. That's always been the MO. And to this day, for the average Democrat voter, yeah, they're going to vote blue no matter who. But it is clear that in the last couple of months, something has changed in the Democrat Party. And I'm not talking about in places like New York City. I'm talking about in actual swing states like Michigan. It is clear that there are a lot more Democrat voters than in prior elections that are saying we're either not going to vote or in some cases, they're going to vote for the Republican. Again, this is not the average Democrat. This is not 80% of the Democrat Party. It's not. But it is a sizable chunk, like in Michigan. And of course, there are a multitude of reasons for why this is happening. But I would argue the number one reason why we are seeing a lot of Democrat voters skeptical of voting Democrat in 26 is the fact the Democrat Party right now, they are facing a purity spiral. For those that don't know, the Democrat Party, the average voter, the average member of Congress, they agree on like 95% of the issues. Like 95% of the issues they agree on. Seriously, look at the congressional voting record for every Democrat. They are in line on basically everything. Compare that to the GOP, where you have people like Tom Tillis, Mitch McConnell, Bill Cassidy, like 40% of the time voting against us because reasons. Democrats, meanwhile, they don't have anybody like that. However, it doesn't matter to the radical wing of the Democrat Party. You have to be 100% in line on every single issue. If you disagree with them on one issue, a single fucking issue, it doesn't matter what it is, they will force you out of office. Like in Colorado, you had a literal progressive get primaried out because she disagreed with these people on one issue, like one or two issues, and that's it. She was a party line vote. She was a progressive on basically everything, but it wasn't enough. And that's what's going on here. That 5%, that's the crazy shit that even a lot of Democrat voters, they're kind of pushing back on it a little bit. Like they're saying, okay, this is going way too far. They agree with them on 95% of the issues, but that 5%, that is what's causing this fracture. Because these more moderate Democrats, they're horrified. They're finally realizing, oh, wait a second here. These people, they want to get rid of the Senate. They want to abolish the prisons. They want to abolish borders. They want to get rid of the Supreme Court. All this crazy shit that not even many Democrats support. These are the 5% of issues that these people are so crazy on. And I'm not saying every single person's like this. I'm not saying they agree with every single issue like that. But you get the point that, yeah, they're becoming so radical. Even a lot of Democrats are realizing this is going too far. This is going way too far. Because while it is true, the average Democrat voter and even the more moderate ones, they agree on like 95% of the issues. Even the more moderate Democrats, they begin to realize, okay, yeah, we need prisons. We need some semblance of a border. We need the Senate, that sort of thing. This is just common sense stuff. But here's the thing. The opposite is also true. It's not just moderates being horrified at how crazy some of these people are getting, and they're saying, fuck this, we're going to just vote Republican, like what's happening in Michigan. Again, we're not saying half of Stephen voters are going to vote for Mike Rogers, but there's clearly a lot of disconnect between a lot of Stevens voters and El Said. It's not just that. Look at what's happening in Washington 3rd. This is the inverse, where there was a serious challenger against Perez, the current Democrat incumbent. And Perez is representing like a Trump plus 5 seat. So she has to be a tiny bit more moderate. She still is a party line vote on like 95% of things, but stuff like immigration, she is slightly more moderate. She just says, okay, we need some border patrol. We need some kind of secured borders. And you had this absolute nutcase from her left try to primary her out. And he only got 16% of the vote. Of course, for those that don't know, Washington does a jungle primary. That means the top two people, they move on. So it's going to be John Braun versus Perez. Here's the issue for Perez. She took second place. Now, yeah, Heinrich got roughly 16%. You do the math, and that would be more than the Republicans got. That would actually be over 50%. So there are more votes coming in. It is getting a bit better for Braun, but still, if you combine the vote shares, yeah, John Braun would probably lose. Here's the problem. This absolute nutcase, even though he should know this is a Trump district, is saying he will not endorse Perez. She does not deserve another term to stab us in the back. Seriously? This right here is the inverse. You got the more moderate Democrats panicking and realizing, okay, these people are just crazy. These people are delusional. They have no clue what's going on. They're crazy and they're taking power. But also, a lot of these more crazy people, if they don't get every single thing they want, they're going to say, no, we're not going to vote. In fact, nobody vote for her. What? Because you disagree on what? Seriously, what is the main issue that you have an issue with Perez on? Seriously, this is a Trump plus 5 seat. And this nutcase, he's still in the jungle primary, got over 16% of the vote. A good chunk of Democrats voted for this absolute nutcase. This is a problem here. You have more moderate Democrats. They're finally realizing, at least some of them, okay, these people are just crazy. We're getting the fuck out of here. They may not vote Republican. They just probably don't vote. And again, not 80% of Democrats are doing this, but at least a sizable chunk, it looks like they're going to. Meanwhile, you have the opposite happening, where if these nutcases don't get their way, instead of trying to be a team player and try to work something out, they throw everybody under the bus and say, nope, we disagree on 1% of the issues. We don't care. We want her to lose now. This is not good. Yeah, Republicans have issues, and there are some examples of this happening, but not to the scale we're seeing it. At least with the Republican Party, like 95% of the time, yeah, everybody gets behind the nominee. But the Democrats right now, not so much. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.